We're here at the 106th session of the International Labor Conference. I'm here with Nancy LePink, the Chief of the Labor Administration, Labor Inspection, Occupational Safety and Health Branch at ILO, and Nick Leventow, the Chief Technical Advisor for the Safe Youth at Work project. Today we're talking about the Occupational Safety and Health Global Action for Protection flagship program at ILO. Nancy, this year on the ILC agenda, there are several issues such as the survey on occupational safety and health, labor migration, and fundamental principles and rights at work, specifically that are part and parcel of your work with the LabAdmin OSH branch. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the OSH GAP program and how it came to be?
Sure. Well, the OSH GAP program is a flagship program of the ILO. With the catastrophic events that had occurred in Bangladesh and other countries, with the commitments that had been made by the G20 and the G7 to improve occupational safety and health globally, and with the recent inclusion in the UN Sustainable Development Goals of the target to safe and secure working environments for all workers, the ILO determined that there was a need for it to redouble its efforts to assist member states to reduce the intolerable number of work-related deaths, injuries, and diseases, and to renew its efforts to build a culture of prevention. And it also recognized that in order to do that, it couldn't fully pursue what was needed without going beyond its regular budget resources. So to meet the need, the ILO committed to developing this flagship program, which it calls OSH Global Action for Prevention.
Okay. So what does that mean in practical terms? How does that translate at country and regional levels?
Well, there were four key objectives in developing the flagship program. One was to develop an ILO strategy for the implementation of key ILO conventions. In particular, the ILO Occupational Safety and Health Convention, the Promotional Framework Convention 187. The other thing that the objective of the Global Flagship Program was to develop an outcome-based intervention framework focused on what were the key capacities needed in countries to improve occupational safety and health, such as occupational safety and health laws and regulations, enforcement, social dialogue, and the competency of employers and workers related to occupational safety and health. And finally, the objective of the OSH GAP program was to help countries to better assess what their needed capacity was, to set priorities, and then to implement actions to establish the capacities that they needed to improve occupational safety and health.
Okay. So what is the relationship, maybe you can describe, of the OSH GAP program to governments or member states' calls for assistance in onboarding the key conventions? How does that work?
Well, there's a very tight connection, particularly with Convention 187, which is a system-based approach to improving occupational safety and health. So that convention focuses on the need or the mechanism by which to improve OSH would be the development of a national OSH policy, the development of a national system, and the development of national programs. But what the OSH GAP program is, it provides a framework, and it provides assistance, very targeted assistance, to helping countries actually operationalize that convention. So the hope here is that not only for those countries who've ratified already, that we're now in a much better position to help them operationalize that convention, but also it will give courage to other countries to similarly ratify, because they know that there'll be the support from the ILO that they need to implement.
Okay, very clear. So that's a really good overview, really good picture, I think, for someone who has never come across OSH GAP, or if you look at our webpage and you see Occupational Safety and Health Global Action for Prevention. Clear. So maybe we could talk a little bit about impact in people's everyday lives. This is sort of a global picture that you've given us. I'd like to do for that to turn to you, Nick, as technical advisor for the Safe Youth at Work project within the OSH-GAP program, and to talk about the issue specifically of safety and health for young workers, why this is such a critical issue today, and how OSH-GAP is responding to this.
Thanks, Jared, and thanks, Nancy. As Jared said, I'm the Chief Technical Advisor for the Safe Youth at Work project, which is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor. And the idea behind the project and the way it actualizes the concepts that underlie the OSH-GAP program is to look at OSH national systems from fixed perspectives. In this case, OSH data and statistics, OSH policies and laws, OSH technical capacity, and OSH awareness and knowledge, and to work in multiple countries to drive forward national OSH system improvements organized around those four themes. The reason that the target population of the project is young workers is because young workers are shown statistically to be the most vulnerable in the workplace. They're young, they have less experience, they need more supervision, they often lack appropriate training or may be assigned to inappropriate tasks. For these and a variety of reasons, young workers suffer the highest rate of injuries in the workplace across all economies, from the most developed to the least developed OSH national systems. So the Safe Youth at Work project uses young workers as a window, if you will, into the national OSH system to drive system-level improvements through this strategic focus on young workers.
I think also that when we talk about building a culture of prevention, and there's just seems to make sense that beginning with young workers and also young entrepreneurs,
yes,
and helping them build
Sure.
that future seems to make sense.
Absolutely. The building a culture of prevention is in the title of the project, and the idea is that if you really want to change at national level, at ground level, what's going on in OSH, what's going on in the workplace, work with young people who themselves will become the leaders and the future managers of enterprises, of systems, and instill in them from an early age the importance of including OSH into all the considerations that prevail in the workplace, including all other labor standards as well.
This is sort of proactive OSH.
Exactly. OSH is, I think, very appropriately challenged or worked with by the ILO as a systems approach, because it takes lots of different inputs across lots of different disciplines to be effective. So you need strong awareness and knowledge, you need great data and statistics, appropriate policies, and targeted capacity. And so the project works through those areas, the OSH-GAP program works through those areas to try to build a strategic global view on driving forward prevention culture.
Right. And when you're looking at the future of work, this is particularly where I think a systems approach has the flexibility and the opportunity to address these new issues and these new hazards and risks that will be coming forward. But as you talk to young people, their idea of work, their idea of what work means to them, and how it will necessarily have to influence how we think about things that we think are just sort of basic, which is safety and health. But we need to kind of build in that culture from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Nick.
No, I was just going to comment on that. One of the things that we're doing in the project is engaging young people directly through a series of global events, the upcoming World Congress on Safety and Health. We're engaging them not only to tell us in their own words and in their own media compositions what does safety mean to them, but we're bringing a large number of young workers to the Congress to engage with world experts on OSH, not only so that their concerns can be heard, but also so that they can be engaged in beginning to develop interventions and strategies to improve OSH when they return to their countries.
Okay. No, I was just reaching for this. I know, Nick, you had brought these along, these lovely posters for the media competition that you just referred to, which is this is open to anyone who's aged 15 to 24?
Yeah, and just to make things fair, we have two categories. So we have a 15 to 18 and an 18 to 24 category, and we're inviting posters, photos, stories, songs, films, video loops, GIFs, you name it. But what we've seen so far is that to young people, OSH and safety and health at work mean lots of different things.
Sure.
And it's important that those different perspectives be brought to the table and worked on collectively, not only among experts at World Congresses, but in enterprises, so that we can develop sustainable solutions to this problem.
Okay. And Nancy, I was just going to say two things that I heard. I wonder if you could comment on. But one, sort of pulling this back, then the Safe Youth at Work interventions around World Congress, what LabAdmin OSH will be doing there, bringing the youth voices to the world stage on occupational safety and health in September. You were talking about systems, and maybe we could draw what Nick is saying back into the big picture about the OSH gap and the systems that we're trying to put into place.
So to operationalize these key objectives, or to bring them into being, the OSH gap is also, in addition to its project work, which is actually operating in a number of areas, OSH and global supply chains, improving awareness of OSH, particularly related to youth, looking at OSH networks, particularly institutions and organizations and agencies that are focused on OSH, and how can the global flagship program better support their ability to disseminate knowledge, to develop good practices around the globe. But we're also looking at, and this is part of Nick's project with the focus on youth, but we're also looking at improving occupational safety and health data and development of indicators, so we can do a better job of measuring but also driving change. So this past year for the Safe Day for 2017, the ILO focused on the need for reliable occupational safety and health data, and to increase the confidence in our notification and recording systems of occupational safety and health data. But this will be, looking at a systems-based approach. The idea is our one key system is how are we effectively collecting data, how are we using that data to help set priorities, to inform policy, to inform both at a national and at an enterprise level as to what are good practices.
Sure.
Okay.
If I could just comment on that, Nancy.
Please.
Take the analogy of a car. My car is not working. I take it into the garage and I say, please fix it. Well, they don't just pour oil on it. They figure out what's wrong, and they need data to do that. They need to understand, is it the engine, is it the transmission, is it the tires? And similarly with an OSH national system, you need to understand where the problems are before you start to fix them. So the idea behind indicators, it's not just dry numbers, but it's a diagnostic that allows a national system, the social partners and civil society to work together intelligently to fix the problems that exist in the system. Within our project, for example, we have a knowledge, attitudes, and behavior study that we're implementing in 3 of our countries, Myanmar, Vietnam, and the Philippines. The idea is if we better understand knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors about OSH among workers, employers, and government officials, we can then identify gaps and needs, and then we can target resources around awareness and knowledge to meet those gaps and needs, so that there's a firmer foundation and a better understanding where the problems are and what needs to be fixed.
Okay. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things I heard. You just said where the gaps are, and of course we're talking about OSH gap. I mentioned that because I see a question here on Facebook. Can you explain what you mean by the OSH gap? So I think it sort of brings us back around again to why we're here, what we're talking about today, and maybe a good time just to say that we're here at the 106th session of the International Labor Conference. I'm here with Nancy LePink, Chief of the Labor Administration, Labor Inspection, Occupational Safety and Health Branch at ILO, and with Nick Leventow, who has been talking about his work as Chief Technical Advisor with the Safe Youth at Work project, which is part of the OSH-GAP. So again, the OSH-GAP. What do we mean by OSH-GAP?
So the OSH-GAP is the International Labor Organization's global flagship program on occupational safety and health. And a few years ago, the ILO recognized, as a result of various events like the Rana Plaza catastrophe, it recognized that there was a need for the ILO to sort of redouble its efforts to actually develop a global strategy and an intervention framework and to improve its resources and tools and knowledge around OSH so that it could provide greater assistance to countries to target, to identify what their priorities are, to seize where the opportunities were to make improvements in OSH. So this is a global program, but with a global strategy, which then is playing out in very specific projects. And those projects, like Nick's project, Safe Youth at Work, has a very clear objective regarding youth, but in the process it's developing tools and knowledge that will then be used and integrated into future projects under the OSH-GAP program. So this is a whole momentum building and capacity building of the ILO, but in turn so that we are in a stronger position to help our constituents.
I could actually give an example of that, which is that in technical and vocational training, the project that I lead is working with TVET institutions to ensure
Sorry,
that
Nick, TVET is?
TVET is technical, vocational, educational,
Okay.
Education and training. So to make sure that as young workers, young people acquire skills so that they're successful in the workplace, they also acquire safety skills so that they become better, more aware, more productive, and more careful as employees. The tools that we develop to ensure that training around skills is also training around OSH will be tools that can then be multiplied through the OSH-GAP program and drive a higher level of OSH understanding at the technical and vocational level.
Well, it's very timely. There's another question about someone commenting from Geneva has mentioned the biggest problem in OSH is education. Do you agree? So,
No.
Nick, that's sort of a slow ball pitch.
No,
but,
yeah. I wouldn't agree. I think there's no biggest problem in OSH. I think there are lots of different problems in OSH. Each country has unique problems. Sometimes they're institutional. Sometimes they relate more directly to resources. Sometimes they relate to very, very complex situations around the labor force. So how those problems are addressed is the exact point of the OSH-GAP program. Let's take a unified approach. Let's develop a strategy that's agile and responsive to needs as we understand them together with our member states, and then focus resources accordingly. So education is important. Understanding and awareness is important. If we had more, then perhaps we'd get more focused action. But we need more data to understand, better what exactly the problems are that we need to address. We need stronger skills and capacity along with better education.
Okay, so
that's why under the OSH-GAP, we've developed sort of an intervention framework which captures these key pieces that are necessary. So laws and regulations, the capacity of government to achieve compliance, the competency of workers and employers, social dialogue, critically important, and OSH professionals in a country and institutions that can support both enterprises but also the government in performing its responsibilities. And as Nick has said, crucial, good data.
which sort of also comes back to Safe Day 2017,
Yes.
no?
Yeah.
Optimizing data,
Right.
collection and use of good, accurate, updated, reliable data.
So clearly needing effective notification and reporting related to OSH fatalities, injuries, and diseases is critical. But as the example that Nick gave of his study that would be looking at knowledge and attitudes of of a sector of workers, particularly youth, I mean, this is also very important data because
Absolutely.
you can't create
Okay.
good educational programs if you don't know the population you're working with,
Right.
you don't know what resonates with them, that you don't know what the barriers will be to them understanding the information you're imparting.
So it's qualitative and quantitative.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. We actually had a couple of questions, and I'm going to throw in the mix here. Again, here with Nancy LePink from ILO's, who is the chief, of ILO's Labor Administration, Labor Inspection, Occupational Safety and Health Branch, Nick Levanto, with who's the Chief Technical Advisor for the Safe Youth at Work project. So question from Jeff, in the developing world there are often laws on the books, but a lack of resources to ensure that OSH is actually enforced. How do we make the change?
Okay, well, I'll take a swing at that,
Sure,
and,
go
and,
for it.
and Nancy has a lot of perspective on this as well.
Okay.
It's not just in the developing world. Resources and capacity are a problem everywhere. And I think, the quickest answer, the most direct answer to this problem is that's why we need a better understanding. That's why we need better data, because we have to recognize there is now, and there always will be a limited, share of resources available to work on OSH. And the idea of the OSH Gap program is let's be focused, let's be strategic, and let's be demand-driven, and not just punch out cookie-cutter solutions. Let's really be responsive to real problems.
So one of the
Nancy?
things that the program is looking at is how do we make the labor inspectorate better and more capable to respond to priority compliance issues. And so, of course, the more resources, the better. But working within reality, that means that you not only have to have a well-trained labor inspectorate that can execute its responsibilities, but you also need, as Nick said, you'll never have enough resources to regularly inspect every workplace in a country, no matter, even if you have generous amount of resources for occupational safety and health. So, and furthermore, it can't be solely the responsibility of the labor inspectorate to achieve that outcome.
Some great questions here.
Okay,
I just want to share with you both. We'll put on the table. One great question from Kadrea. What are the various modes being considered to reach youth? Curriculum development, question, using civic groups, clubs.
Sure.
I mean, I know we've talked about a couple here.
Sure. We talked about the media competition, so we're inviting young people to show us through their creative skills what safety means for them, and inviting some of the best submissions into the conversation so that we can convey in the way a young person sees the problem, what those issues are and how they need to be addressed. In one of the countries in which we're working with a scouting organization so that there's a safety badge that they can earn by doing a project around occupational safety and health. So the idea is that we, within the project and within the OSH Gap program, we look for existing networks. We look for institutions and frameworks that can support OSH knowledge, whether it's an educational institution or a youth or civic organization, and then get them on board and make OSH part of their conversation.
Right. So, and I think that's in part what the systems-based approach, and I think Nick touched on this earlier, it's not creating whole new exclusively OSH systems, but it's integrating OSH into existing systems. So existing educational institutions and existing community-based organizations. I think critical is that we talk extensively about skills and skills for young people to find employment. Well, integrated into skills should be occupational safety and health.
Right.
Because if we invest in youth by skills, we don't want them to get hurt the first day on the job. So consequently,
so making this sustainable, long-term, built-in, this is what we mean by systems approach. A couple of more excellent questions, so I'll throw another one in the mix. And it seems we may have a small problem here. We want to make sure you're live, Nancy. So
I can switch mics.
Let's try this. And is that working now? Okay, let's see. Get you back on before we ask you to answer a question. All right, great. So,
Happy to.
Yeah, actually, really interesting question. How can we, and goes to what you just said in terms of sort of youth, the quality of jobs for young people. How can we build a culture of prevention when so many young people are in informal, low-quality jobs?
Yeah, well, that's a question that really goes beyond OSH, and youth employment programs, school-to-work transition programs that the ILO leads also address that. In the informal context, you're right, it's very difficult, not only because the structures, the lines of authority, the rules of the game, if you will, in the workplace aren't always clear, but they're often changing because young workers are often found in precarious employment, moving in and out of positions where, again, the rules are different on the ground. It's vitally important to reach informal employment. Several of the countries in which we're working have recently expanded their OSH coverage at the national level to encompass informal workplaces, and it's a significant challenge. From my perspective, an important part is starting the conversation early and making sure that young people, no matter where they're going to end up, whether it be formal sector or informal sector, have some grounding through training, through youth organization, through education, that they need to be aware of OSH when they step into the workforce.
But this is also, I think, one of the objectives of the Youth Congress and bringing together youth champions, because at the World Congress in Singapore this September, is that this is an opportunity for actually youth to help us find these solutions and to actually sort create the
crowdsourcing these OSH solutions from young people themselves.
Where would a young person who's in the informal economy go to find out information? Where would their awareness, how would their awareness be raised regarding potential hazards and risks that they are confronted with? And so this is the Youth Congress is, you're right, I hadn't thought of it that way, but it is a real opportunity for crowdsourcing.
And I think one of the reasons we're doing that, I find it interesting that we're getting questions, how can we better reach youth and how can we better reach these difficult workplaces? And the answer is, we want to hear from you.
Sure, yeah.
We're not
via
sure
Facebook,
that we knew.
Via Facebook Live.
Via Facebook,
hopefully.
Via the ILO webpage, and please write in with your questions and send us your comments so that we can better understand your perspective on safety and not have this a top-down solution.
Yeah.
And this conversation that we're going to start in Singapore, we're going to carry on for the rest, certainly well into 2018 and ideally beyond. So because we're going to build these youth champions that will then go back to their countries and be supported by organizations and institutions to continue this conversation. And so consequently, our hope is that, of course, we'll stay connected with them and we can continue to learn from them as we go.
Okay.
So that just sort of brought it back for me again in terms of the OSH gap, what's being done immediately through the Safe Youth at Work project, sort of the big picture, what's being put on the table for the World Congress on Safety and Health, what LabAb and OSH is bringing, including inviting and bringing some 200 young champions on OSH, or who will certainly leave that conference as champions, take that back to their home countries. Maybe just a last word on that again. Nancy LePink, Chief of the Labor Administration, Labor Inspection, Occupational Safety and Health Branch at ILO, and Nick Leventow, Chief Technical Advisor for the Safe Youth at Work project. We're here talking about the Occupational Safety and Health Global Action Program for prevention. I just wanted to throw in a word saying that, you mentioned, or Nick, if you have questions, we're continuing the conversation, and really the Congress is just the beginning of the conversation, as you mentioned. Of course, you can find us on the ILO website, ilo.org/OSH. Go there and please do send in further questions or post them on Facebook if you have further questions that we haven't gotten to today. Any last word from either of you?
Well, all I was going to say is we've certainly been talking quite a bit about young workers, but recognize that the OSH gap is for all workers, and even within the Safe Youth at Work project, we're using young workers as a theme and as a point of entry because they're highly vulnerable and they suffer a high level of harm, but really the project is around improving national law systems for the betterment of all.
Yes, and consequently, we have a youth congress at the World Congress, but the World Congress will address a broad breadth of issues related to occupational safety and health, OSH data and indicators, OSH and global supply chains. So it will be a broad-based focus, but we're taking this opportunity with the support of the U.S. Department of Labor project to create this youth congress, which we're hoping we can then replicate beyond. So I would close on one, extending an invitation to everyone, particularly youth, to one, go to the website where they can look at this media competition, where they could explore whether they might want to participate in the Congress as a youth champion, but also that anyone else, and OSH professionals, government, social partners, obviously this is a very important event. Happens every 3 years. This year it will be in Singapore, September 3rd through the 6th.
Okay.
And so consequently, come and join in.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in Singapore. Thank you.
Bye-bye.